After allegedly killing the mother of his 5 children and fleeing to Canada, St. Paul resident Wesley Caboy has been arrested.
We were able to take the suspect into custody.
That's a sentence that should stop you cold. Not because it's unusual, but because it isn't. Because somewhere between the words allegedly and federal partners, there is a woman. A real woman. 29 years old, 5 children, a job she just earned, dreams she was still building, an apartment in St. Paul that smelled like birthday cake on what was supposed to be a celebration. Her name was Shania Thompson. And she deserved more than a headline. She deserved more than a case number. She deserved more than to be remembered only in the aftermath of what was done to her. So tonight, we are not going to rush through her story. We're going to sit in it, we're going to say her name, and we're going to make sure that by the time this is over, you know exactly who she was and exactly how the system, the patterns, and the people around her failed to keep her here. December in St. Paul, Minnesota doesn't ease you in. It arrives hard, single-digit temperatures, skies that go dark before dinner time, sidewalks that stay slick no matter how many times someone salts them. For families in Dayton's Bluff, a working-class neighborhood on the city's east side, December means surviving winter the same way you survive everything else. With routine, with community, with small joys squeezed into tight spaces. Kids in school, bills paid where they can be, small celebrations treated like big ones, because that's what you do when the budget is real, and the love is realer. On East 3rd Street, one of those tight spaces belonged to Shania Thompson and her 5 children. And on December 11th, 2025, the birthday of her oldest daughter, that space should have been full of nothing but noise, presents, and cake. Instead, it became a crime scene, and Shania's 5 children became witnesses to something no child should ever have to carry. This is the story of how that happened. And more importantly, this is the story of who Shania was before it did. Shania Thompson was 29 years old. Born and raised with deep family roots, she was the kind of person who held people together without making a production of it. She called her mother every day, sometimes 5 or 6 times, not out of obligation, but because that was who she was. Present. Plugged in, someone you could count on at any hour and never have to wonder if she meant it. By 2025, she had 5 children, ranging in age from roughly 12 years old down to a baby boy barely 1 year old. Their names were Selena, Winter, Willow, Junior, and Skylar. And for Shania, those 5 kids were not a burden she carried. They were the reason she moved the way she did. With urgency, with purpose. With the kind of grind that doesn't need to be announced because it speaks for itself. She had just secured a position with the Minnesota Department of Revenue. A real job, a stable job. The kind that signals a woman who is building something that lasts. She was also developing a growing online presence as a digital creator, selling wigs and clothing, documenting her hustle, talking openly about income and independence. A quick scroll through her social media told the story of a woman who was proud of her life even when the pieces were still coming together. Smiling videos, birthday moments, baby updates, couple content. She posted it all, not to perform, but because she was genuinely happy to be alive and becoming. She was not naive. She was not passive. She was not a woman waiting to be rescued. She was a woman in motion, doing everything she was supposed to do, loving the people in her life fiercely, and believing, the way so many women in her position believe, that love was something you could work through if you just stayed committed enough. That belief would cost her everything. Wesley Benedict Caboy, also reported in some documents as Cowboy, was 33 years old. He came from Liberia, arriving in America wearing ambition like a second skin. He had a small music presence online, dropping tracks on YouTube that earned him modest praise in Liberian and diaspora circles. He posted himself in his Brinks armored security guard uniform with the energy of a man who wanted to be perceived as solid, dependable, established. On social media, he curated the image of a hustler with roots, proud of where he came from, determined to prove himself in a country that didn't hand anything to anyone. What he did not post in any consistent or meaningful way was Shania, or their children. His pages were for himself, his music, his grind, his identity. Thompson and those 5 kids existed fully in his real life, but in his public life, they were invisible. as if erasing them online made it easier to control them offline. And control had already been a pattern long before December 11th. According to investigators in the criminal complaint filed after Shania's death, Wesley had a documented history of pulling out a gun and pointing it at Shania during arguments. Not once. Not in one heated moment that could be explained away. A pattern. A recurring behavior. A man who had learned or decided that the fastest way to end an argument with the mother of his children was to aim a weapon at her head and watch her go quiet. The children knew. They had seen it. They would later tell investigators exactly what they had seen, exactly what they had heard, and exactly what those moments felt like from behind closed doors. Their words would become the backbone of a murder charge. Their testimony would be the evidence. These are children, between the ages of 1 and 12, who were essentially trained by their father's behavior to understand that their mother's life was always one argument away from ending. And Shania stayed. Not because she was weak, not because she didn't see the signs, but because abuse is designed to keep you exactly where it needs you. Hopeful, committed, and convinced that the version of the person you fell in love with is still in there somewhere, waiting to come back. Her sister would later share a detail that cut straight through. Their family's belief is that when Wesley returned on December 11th bearing birthday gifts, he had already learned that Shania was planning to leave him. She was making arrangements to move back to Michigan. She was choosing herself and her children. And for a man who had spent years using a gun to maintain dominance, the idea of her walking away freely was apparently unthinkable. December 11th, 2025. A Thursday, the oldest daughter's birthday. Wesley had already left the apartment earlier that day after a fallout between him and Shania. That alone should have been a signal, the kind of charged, tense beginning to a day that people in volatile relationships recognize immediately. But then he came back. He came back bearing gifts, presents for the birthday girl, smiles at the door. The universal language of "don't be angry at me yet." Shania let him in. And why wouldn't she? This was the father of her children. Today was a child's birthday. She had 5 kids counting on her to keep the peace, keep the joy intact, keep the day from becoming another memory they'd have to survive. She took his return as a reset, a chance to exhale, to give the kids the celebration they deserved, to believe that maybe today could just be a good day. The apartment filled with the way apartments fill on birthdays. Noise, anticipation, children moving in and out of rooms, the promise of cake somewhere in the near future. But the peace didn't hold. According to the criminal complaint and the accounts pieced together from multiple sources, an argument started again. It escalated, and at some point the decision was made to send all 5 children to their bedroom to wait until it was time to cut the cake. That detail, 5 children in a back room, told to wait, is where this story stops being just a domestic dispute and becomes something that will follow those kids forever. Because what happened next, they heard. And at least one of them saw. From behind that closed door, one of Shania's daughters saw Wesley with a gun pointed at her mother's head. She saw her mother reach up and try to push it away, and then she heard the shot. Others heard the scream. All of them heard the thud, the sound of their mother hitting the floor. There is no version of this that doesn't shatter something in you if you let yourself sit in it. These children, the oldest around 12, the youngest barely a year old, were separated from their mother by a single wall and a closed door on their sibling's birthday. They were told to wait for cake, and instead they got the sound of a gunshot and a silence that swallowed everything after it. Wesley did not call 911. He did not rush to Shania's side. He did not perform CPR, apply pressure, or do a single thing that a person does when they believe what happened was an accident. Instead, he went to the children's room. He told them to get their things. They were going to see family in Grand Rapids, Michigan. No explanation. No mention of their mother. No answer to the oldest daughter's terrified questions. Just orders. Just movement. Just a man who had already decided that his survival mattered more than the 5 people he had just traumatized for life. They drove away from that apartment, away from Shania, still on that floor, and headed east into the dark. Shania Thompson lay in her apartment for nearly an entire day before anyone found her. Think about that. Let it land. She was killed on the night of December 11th. Police were dispatched for a welfare check at approximately 4:15 p.m. on December 12th the following day. She had been there for somewhere close to 18 hours. The woman who called her mother 5 or 6 times a day. The woman whose children were begging relatives over the phone to go check on her. Left alone in that apartment in her bedroom, with blood pooled near her head and a handgun recovered at the scene. A neighbor who lived in the building said it plainly. The way people speak when they're too stunned to pretty it up. Yeah, this happened in my building. It's so sad. They said she was there a whole day before they found her. She a real mom. This shit's so wrong. He did it the night before. They didn't find her till like 4 p.m. and he took her kids to his mom's house out of state. It's heartbreaking. That's the truth of it. Stripped of legal language, stripped of procedural framing. A real mom. Left there, her kids gone, and the man who did it already hundreds of miles away. When officers entered the apartment at 540 Broadway Street, they found her in the bedroom, gunshot wound to the head, blood pooled near her. A shower curtain nearby, a handgun recovered at the scene. No children, no Wesley. Just Shania, alone in the space where she had built her life, on the same day her daughter was supposed to be celebrating another year. By the time St. Paul police found Shania's body, Wesley Cowboy had already put nearly 500 miles between himself and the apartment. After the shooting, he loaded all 5 children into a vehicle and drove 8 hours from St. Paul, Minnesota, to his mother's home in Grand Rapids, Michigan. 8 hours. With 5 children. One of them barely a year old. At least one of them already calling relatives in a panic, begging someone to check on her mother. During that drive, Shania's oldest daughter reached out to family members and said, "Please, I think she's hurt." Those were the words of a child who already understood, who had heard what she had heard, who knew somewhere deep in her body that her mother was not okay. And still, she was trapped in a car with her father, moving further away from the only home she knew, being told nothing. According to the criminal complaint, Wesley told the children during that drive that their mother was going to be okay. He told them she was going to live. He said this knowing exactly what he had done. He looked at 5 children who had just heard their mother be shot, children who were terrified, confused, grieving without the language to call it that yet, and he lied to their faces, to protect himself, to buy time, to get across the border. He arrived at his mother's home in Grand Rapids, stayed for approximately 1 hour, then left. He took his brother's red Kia, abandoned his own vehicle, and drove away, leaving those 5 children behind without explanation. From that point forward, he was not trying to be a father. He was trying to disappear. On December 12, 2025, the same day Shania's body was discovered in her apartment, Wesley Cowboy crossed from the United States into Canada on foot at the Sarnia Blue Water Bridge. It was recorded at 10:57 a.m. He no longer had the vehicle he'd been driving. He walked across the border, alone, without his children, without his phone ringing. Just a man trying to outrun what he'd done by putting an international boundary between himself and accountability. From there, he traveled deeper into Canada and booked a flight from Canada to Mexico. That's when federal involvement became unavoidable. State lines were already crossed. Now a country's border had been breached. The case moved from local law enforcement to federal partners. The kind of coordination that only kicks in when someone has made it unmistakably clear they are not planning to come back. He was arrested at the airport in Toronto before he could board that flight. The man who once fled Liberia for America, who arrived here chasing dreams that never quite materialized, who built a family with a woman who believed in him, who spent years using a gun to assert dominance over the mother of his children. That man was arrested in a Toronto airport mid-flight to Mexico, days after shooting Shania Thompson in the head in front of their kids on their daughter's birthday. He had nowhere left to run. With Wesley in Canadian custody, Ramsey County prosecutors moved swiftly. He was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder under Minnesota law. Count 1, murder in the second degree with intent, not premeditated. Count 2, murder in the second degree while committing a felony, specifically second-degree assault. Each charge carries a potential sentence of up to 40 years in prison. The state's position, laid out in the criminal complaint, is direct. That on December 11, 2025, Wesley Cowboy intentionally shot Shania Thompson in the head during an argument while their 5 children were present nearby. That he then drove those children across state lines, deposited them with his mother, switched vehicles, crossed the Canadian border on foot, and booked a flight to Mexico before being apprehended. As of this recording, those remain allegations in a court process that is still unfolding. Wesley is expected to be extradited to Minnesota to face these charges in Ramsey County District Court. There has been no publicly reported trial verdict or sentence at the time of this video. But what is not an allegation is the gun that was recovered. What is not an allegation is Shania's body, found alone in her apartment 18 hours after he left with her children. What is not an allegation is the testimony of those 5 kids who told investigators what they heard and what they saw through that bedroom door. Some things speak for themselves. When the news broke, grief didn't stay quiet. It poured out online, raw, unpolished, and heavy with the kind of shock that only comes when violence collides with someone people actually knew. One of those voices belonged to a woman named Fatima, a seller hunting you. Shania had recently been in contact with, still trying to process the fact that one of her regulars was gone. She was my customer, one of my loyal ones. She got shot in the head by her baby daddy the other day, and that's been messing with me. I really build bonds with the people that shop with me. Her last messages to me was, "I'm trying to get some Nike tees for my man. I'm tricking on him. And he killed her on their daughter's birthday." Read that again. A woman budgeting love, shopping for the man who was planning her death, trying to do something kind for someone who had already decided she had to go. There is no crueler illustration of what it means to love someone who has weaponized that love against you. Shania's last act of affection toward Wesley was looking for a gift for him, and he came to her apartment with a gun. Then came Shania's sister Shayna. She posted a video that has been seen thousands of times, not because it went viral the way things go viral, but because the truth in it travels. She stood in front of a camera, and she said what families of victims are so rarely given space to say, not in a courtroom, not in a press conference, but in plain language on her own terms.
It is with such heavy heart and pain that I come on here to tell y'all that my sister, Shania Thompson, was shot and killed on December 11th of 2025, and she was shot by her children's father and leaves 5 kids behind. Her child's father came over to celebrate my niece's birthday, and we don't have any evidence right now of how an argument ensued, but our family's speculation was that an argument ensued because he found out that she was trying to move back to Michigan and she was trying to leave him and be happy, and he couldn't deal with that fact, so he shot her in her head, y'all. He shot her in her head, and her 5 kids that she's leaving behind, they were there. They were there, and they heard everything and saw everything. Her killer's name is Wesley Kobe. Wesley Kobe is his name. This is my sister. And she was such a devoted mother, a devoted friend, a devoted sister, a devoted daughter. She meant so much to me and my family. And we are so devastated that she's gone and that he took her from us. He took my sister, and then he fled to Michigan with all 5 of their kids. And he dropped them off at his mother's house, in which he spent an hour at her house. And it's believed that his mom and his brother helped him escape because he swapped out cars. He left his car at his mother's house, and he took his brother's car, and he fled. All the while telling her kids that their mom would be okay and that she was going to live, knowing that that was a lie. He even told his kids that he planned to kill himself and all other types of crazy things that shouldn't be said to kids. And mind you, her kids are between the ages of 12 and 1. My babies don't even know that their mom is gone.
Selena, Winter, Willow, Junior, Skylar. 5 names, 5 children. The oldest understanding too much, the youngest understanding nothing yet. All of them somewhere in the middle of a grief they have barely begun to process. The oldest daughter, the one who reached out during that 8-hour drive, who begged family to check on her mother, who already knew she is 12 years old. She is going to spend the rest of her life carrying December 11th, 2025 inside her. Not as a date, as a feeling, as a sound, as a silence she recognized before she had the words for it. And then there is Shania's mother, the woman who talked to her daughter every single day, 5 or 6 times a day, about everything and nothing, about the kids, about dreams, about life. She took to social media after Shania's death and she wrote something that every person who has ever loved someone should read. Not because it will comfort you, but because it is the most honest account of what this kind of loss actually feels like, written by the person who felt it most. This is what she wrote in full. December 11th took my baby from me. My daughter Shania is gone, and my heart is broken in a way that words will never be able to explain. There's a pain so deep inside me that I can barely breathe through it. Losing a child is not something a mother is ever prepared for, but losing 2 children is unbearable. It goes against everything life is supposed to be. Shania wasn't just my daughter, she was my best friend. We talk every single day, sometimes 5 or 6 times a day, about everything, about nothing, about life, her kids, her dreams. Now the silence where her voice should be is deafening, and it breaks me over and over again. I mourn not only for myself, but for her 5 beautiful children, 5 innocent souls, who now have to grow up in a world without their mother's voice, her hugs, her laughter, her love. Shania was more than a daughter. She was a mother, a protector, a light. She loved her babies fiercely. They were her whole world. Please keep her children close in your prayers. Please speak her name. Please remember her. She will always be my baby. Always. She said, losing 2 children. Let that sit with you for a moment. We don't know the full weight of that particular sentence, but we know it was written by a woman who was not just grieving once and who somehow found the words to post them publicly in the middle of that, because she needed the world to know who her daughter was, because she needed people to say Shania's name. So say it. Shania Thompson, say it. In the days after the shooting, Shania's family released balloons into the sky. It is one of those small acts of grief that cannot really explain itself, but doesn't need to. Sometimes you just need to send something up. Sometimes the weight of staying on the ground with all of it is too much, and you need to let something go so you can keep standing. Her community gathered. A GoFundMe was established to support the 5 children and cover memorial costs. Violence Free Minnesota added her name to their annual memorial roll. Another woman remembered in the context of intimate partner homicide. Another name added to a list that should not exist. Let's be precise about what we know for certain, because precision matters when a person's story is at stake. Shania Thompson, 29 years old, was shot in the head and killed inside her St. Paul apartment on December 11th, 2025, on her daughter's birthday, while her 5 children were in a nearby room. She was found approximately 18 hours later after her oldest daughter, during an 8-hour drive away from the scene, contacted family and begged them to check on her mother. Wesley Benedict Cowboy, the father of all 5 of those children, is accused in a criminal complaint of pulling the trigger, loading the children into a car, driving them to Michigan, leaving them with his mother, crossing into Canada on foot, and booking a flight to Mexico before being arrested in the Toronto airport by federal authorities. He has been charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, each carrying up to 40 years in prison, and is awaiting extradition to face those charges in Ramsey County District Court. Those are allegations to be tested in a court of law. What needs no test is the pattern. What needs no verdict to be understood is the warning that was already there, the gun pulled during arguments, the control disguised as love, the jealousy that Shana described as the likely trigger for what happened when Shania tried to leave. The research on intimate partner homicide is not subtle. The most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is when the victim attempts to leave. That is not opinion. That is documented, studied, proven fact. And it is the context in which Shania Thompson was murdered. She was trying to leave. She was trying to take her 5 children and go back to Michigan and start over. And the man she was leaving decided that her freedom was something he could not allow. Shania Thompson was more than a victim. She was a woman building something. 5 kids before 30 didn't stop her. It made her move faster. She was working for the state of Minnesota. She was creating content. She was selling products. She was calling her mother 6 times a day. She was shopping for birthday gifts for her daughter. She was trying to get Nike tees for the man who would kill her. She was planning a move back to Michigan so she could finally exhale. She was a devoted mother, a devoted daughter, a devoted sister, a devoted friend, in the words of the people who actually knew her. Her youngest child, barely 1 year old, will grow up with only fragments of her. A voice in a video somewhere, a face in a photo. Stories told by older siblings who remember her fully, who remember the birthday when everything changed. That baby boy, Skylar, will cry for her without understanding why she never comes back. And the older children will remember a woman who gave everything she had, who loved past what was safe to love, and who deserved a completely different ending. She didn't die because love failed. She died because control escalated. Because warnings were visible and dismissed. Because a pattern of gun pointing during arguments is not a personality flaw, it is a rehearsal. And the rehearsal eventually became the act. Shania Thompson's name will not fade into just another headline on this channel. We will say it, we will remember her, and we will keep telling stories like hers, because silence has never once protected anyone. If this video mattered to you, please subscribe, share it, and leave a comment below with Shania's name. Let the algorithm carry her name further than it carried her story. That's the least we can do. Rest in peace, Shania Thompson. Your babies are loved, and you are not forgotten.